The minibus leaped the 10 meters over the river to the ship. The people on the ship seemed normal. They stared in shock as the bus crashed into the cargo on the ship, a stack of cardboard boxes. This was the age before cargo containers. The bus slid for some distance after it landed on the boxes. The bus came to a stop, and there was no explosion after. The people inside the bus plus Zheng and Yingkang were all in terrible condition. Several of them were bleeding from the collision. The veterans quickly regained consciousness. Their bodies were much stronger than a normal person's after all. Zero and G ran out from the bus with their weapons drawn. G picked up Zheng and Yingkang. The two of them struck the tail of the bus during the collision. The damage they received was higher than those inside the bus. Fortunately, both of them were physically strong, especially Zheng. He shielded Yingkang with his body during the collision, and due to his enhancements, they were actually in better shape despite receiving more damage. G helped them sit down, then ran straight toward the bridge. Zero put down his handgun and set up his gauze rifle by the gunwale. He put in a magical bullet and pointed the gun at the port. The zombies were walking into the water, whereas the mummies stopped. They seemed to be scared of the water and thus posed no threat in comparison to the zombies that were jumping in the river. Zheng opened his eyes with difficulty. He tried to get up, but the pain originating from his spine when he moved scared him. They were going to Hamunaptra for the final battle. If his spine broke right now, he would be useless until the end of the movie. And as the most powerful of the team, losing him meant death for the whole team. Sweat streamed down his face as he thought of this. He tried even harder to get up. Don't move. Your spine is dislocated. Do you want to become paralyzed? Yingkang said with a faint voice but sharp words. She made great efforts to reach out her hand to Zheng's back. Then pop. The pain disappeared and he could move freely. Zheng looked at her gratefully. That was when he noticed the wound on her shoulder had tore open. She was carrying him on her wounded shoulder so she could use her other hand to throw the hook rope. Lan and the others had gotten out of the bus by now. Jonathan and the American were in terrible condition, with large wounds on their heads. The others were all wounded to various degrees. Then they heard a whistle and the ship began to speed up. Seemed like G had succeeded. Everyone sighed out in relief. Suddenly Zero yelled, "Be careful. Zheng, if the rifle is not effective against him, then it's all up to you." Everyone looked toward the port, and aside from the sea of zombies and several thousand mummies, they saw a sandstorm flying toward them. The sandstorm formed a face attempting to swallow the ship. Bang. The recoil from the gauze rifle bent the gunwale. No wonder Zero used the gunwale for support. A large area of the face collapsed immediately, then more and more of the face collapsed. The face looked like it was in pain and finally it disappeared. A humanoid figure engulfed in flame dropped into the river. It wasn't until the ship sailed far enough that they couldn't see Cairo anymore that they felt relieved. Everyone collapsed to the floor, whether they were veterans or newbies, players, or characters. They all felt like they just danced on the edge of hell. Zheng was exhausted both physically and mentally. His blood energy was drained empty twice. His chi was emptied when he was fighting the mummies. Then his stamina was emptied after he got knocked off the bus by the werewolf. If it wasn't for Yingkang, he would have been killed in Cairo. Now that he let himself relax, he couldn't hold it anymore and fell asleep. Some time passed. Zheng tasted a slightly sweet liquid in his mouth and opened his eyes. He saw Lan feeding him water tenderly. She was pleasantly surprised when she saw Zheng opened his eyes. She opened her arms and seemed like she wanted to embrace him, but she restrained herself and sat in place. Lan just smiled and said, "Finally awake. How are you feeling? Do your wounds still hurt?" Zheng nodded with a smile. He felt a little bit disappointed, but that was quickly replaced by feeling of relief. He looked around the surrounding. This was a small room. Judging by the steel walls, this should be a cabin inside the ship. The bright sunlight through the window meant that he had slept for a night. "What time is it?" Zheng touched his chest. The injury on his chest and stomach had been bandaged up and was giving him an itchy sensation. Lan smiled. "It's morning already. O'Connell said we will get to land by noon. Let's have breakfast first." Zheng nodded and got up. He suddenly saw a wooden bowl on the side and several wet towels. "What happened to me last night? You took care of me the whole time." Lan had obvious dark circles under her eyes. "You had a fever. We didn't have the medicine for it, so we took turns to wipe your body with a wet towel until 3 a.m. when your body temperature returned normal. How is your body feeling?" Zheng stared at her dark circles and sighed. "Thanks, I am feeling much better, just a little itchy on my chest." "Ho ho, did you apply some ointment on me? I don't feel a bit of pain. It's quite effective." Lan looked as he yawned. "Your self-recovery is strong. You don't even know it yourself, but the injury on your chest began to heal up by itself. Yingkang only did some simple sewing. Judging by the rate you healed, your body should be fully recovered by now." Zheng pushed the door open but turned around in shock when he heard this. Lan nodded at him seriously. That was when he remembered the werewolf penetrated his back with his scalpels during the fight in the museum also. He didn't have the time to think about it, but that injury also healed by itself. Zheng reached for his back and felt a scar. Then the scar layer fell off, revealing fresh skin underneath. Such recovery rate wasn't what a normal human should have. The only possibilities were either due to the vampire bloodline or reaching the second stage of the unlock mode. Vampires had naturally high recovery rate. He never noticed it, but he was also wounded all over the body during the grudge. Of course it might also be the second stage of the unlock mode. If recovery rate was also included in having absolute control of the body at will. Anyway, the extra recovery speed wasn't bad. It was just that he felt he was becoming less human. In fact, after being in this world for so long, and getting numb to killing, perhaps even his mentality wasn't human anymore. Shit, whatever. A higher recovery is a good thing after all. Zheng cursed, then looked at Lan with a smile. "I am starving. You haven't had breakfast either, right? Let's go." Lan returned a smile to him and followed behind Zheng out to the deck. The golden sun rose from afar. Sunlight and the reflections over water painted the deck in gold. They followed this golden path and suddenly felt a sense of peacefulness. "Zero, G and the others were standing in this light in front of them. For a moment, all that was left in their hearts was tranquility. Board here, then we will go toward the marketplace in the desert. If everything goes well, we can buy our supplies and camels there. We should reach Hamunaptra in a few days. O'Connell took out a sand tray and drew their path on the sand. They were having breakfast in the cabin, but due to the threats they made yesterday, the crew rejected their invitation to eat together. Though none of them really cared. Where are our allies? Hunglu asked. Ardith Bey, the man in black, paused for a moment, then drew a line in the sand. In between the marketplace and Hamunaptra. Since the desert is too large, we can only wait in the center, then send our men to search for our enemies. This is the most we can do. Hunglu nodded. Zheng studied the sand tray for a while and said, so this is decided? We still have a few days. Everyone take a good rest, then we have to fight for our lives. We are not running this time. Only one side can live. O'Connell, can we get weapons and ammunitions in the marketplace? Normal bullets are fine. Ardith answered him instead, we have men and a little warehouse in the marketplace. There should be some weapons, even though they are not as powerful as the ones you have, but there should be enough ammunition. Zheng laughed. That's good enough. Normal bullets can kill the regular mummies. Okay, any questions? After we meet with our allies, Zero will go on his own to assassinate that Indian woman. Hunglu, Liang, Hung, and Zuiyu will join the big group. It shouldn't be too dangerous under the protection of so many people. As to Ji, Lan, Yingkong, O'Connell, Evelyn, Jonathan, and me, the 7 of us will continue to Hamunaptra and obtain the Book of Amunare before anyone else. Then we will take away Imhotep's immortality and kill the rest of Team India. What about me? Ardith asked quickly. Of course, stay with your people. The battle inside Hamunaptra doesn't have much to do with the two of you. We caused the problem, so we will take responsibility for it. It's a big help already to block off Imhotep's mummies and possibly assassinate 1 or 2 people in Team India. How can I avoid the battle when I am the descendant of the Pharaoh's bodyguard? Eliminating Imhotep is originally our responsibility. Not even God will prevent us from joining the battle. I should be in the Hamunaptra group. Zheng sighed. Then let the 8 of us go to Hamunaptra. The curator is not young and should stay with the big group. The curator opened his mouth but in the end didn't say anything. Zuiyu though suddenly asked O'Connell, where is the ship going if we keep sailing down the river? To the ocean? O'Connell replied, yes, it should follow the river to the ocean. There will be ocean liners that will take over the cargoes of this ship. Zuiyu laughed. How about this? We newbies will take the ship out to the ocean, since we can't help you anyway. If we die in the battle, it will just cause more burden for you. I don't believe Team India can know we are leaving for the ocean and come chase us. We will be in absolute safety and you won't have to worry about us. Zheng asked Hunglu, what do you think? I think it's not a bad idea. They can be saved and they can't offer much help. If we lose the fight, then it doesn't matter whether they are there or not. Hunglu twirled his hair then smiled. Let them choose themselves. You can sail out to the ocean if you want. Though I hope you will stay with the big group. Hung, what's your choice? Hung paused for a moment then said, I also want to stay with the group. Ho ho, I've always wanted to see what it looks like when thousands of horses charge into a battle. Even though this isn't the best time, I still don't want to miss the opportunity. Zuiyu quickly turned to Liang and looked at him with the eyes of a kitten. Liang only looked at her for a second before giving in. Then I choose to sail out. The 2 of us will sail out to the ocean. This way we can also look after each other. Zheng nodded. So it's decided then. I will give you some normal bullets, 2 rifles, hemostasis spray, and some bandages. But I won't give you a communication device. Once we split up, you can only depend on yourselves. I don't want to be suddenly notified of losing 2 points. Okay. Hunglu laughed and said, give them a communication device. The 2 of them can use one and we can know their situation at any time, or let them know how we are doing. We don't have to worry about it getting into the hands of Team India anyway, so it's fine to give them one, right? They also need some money for the expenses on the way. Give them some gold bars. Zuiyu and Liang nodded. They looked relieved but didn't notice Hunglu's smile. The group decided go ashore after breakfast. Zuiyu and Liang stayed on the ship and sailed down the river. After running for 10 minutes, Hunglu looked at the communication device and suddenly said, change of plans. The bait has been set. Everyone looked at him in confusion. Zheng asked, what bait? Hunglu handed the device to him. Them the 2 that are sailing away. They should be under mind control of the woman from Team India right now. Zheng looked at the device. One of the dots was moving slowing whereas the rest of them were grouped in the center of the screen. Why do you say this? What's wrong? They slowed down. To be precise, they came to a stop 2 minutes ago then began moving slowly, much more slowly than when we were on the ship. If my guess is correct, the woman from Team India can control people from afar, and she put a marker on them. Once they got out the range of the strange protection around us, that woman could sense and control them. Zheng thought for a moment. But they are still alive. Hunglu laughed. That's because she learned of our plan from their memories. If they get killed immediately then we would become suspicious and change our plan. Since these 2 people are powerless, they can leave them alive until we are dead. Judging from the ship slowing down, there's a limit to the range of her mind control. She had the ship slowed down so she could go over and take the 2 of them to Hamunaptra. Then they will wait there and ambush us if they have to go such a distance and still want to reach Hamunaptra before us. Then the only tool of transportation is the plane from the original plot. At the same time, at the entrance to Cairo. This is their plan, leader. What should we do with these 2 people? Have the ship sail back here? Beside the India woman was Shiva and Imhotep. Shiva shook his head. Continue sailing at low speed. How much longer until they go out of range? 6 hours at this rate. Shiva nodded. Then let the ship maintain this speed. Herat and Lamu had already left to find the airport. Once we get the plane, we can quickly chase them down even if they go out of range. High Priest Imhotep, just like you see, we are enemies to the team that's trying to stop you. Enemies of your enemies are your allies. We will help you revive Aang Sunamun, but we need your help to defeat that other team. Can your army continue to Hamunaptra? After learning of the 10,000 cavalries, your army is the only force that can stop them and earn us time to revive Aang Sunamun. Imhotep nodded and said something in Old Egyptian. Then he turned around and roared. A dense sea of mummies was on the streets behind him. They roared as one with him. This earth-shattering, terrorizing roar seemed as if it could cause the whole city of Cairo to buckle. Zheng's group finally reached the marketplace. They split up into two groups according to plan. One group went to stock up the supplies while the other went to buy horses. Yes, we only want horses, not camels. If you don't have enough horses, we will get the rest from other merchants, Jonathan said to the merchant as he pinched a gold nugget with his fingers. One had to admit that the plus side to greed was the ability to take every advantage possible in bargaining. Despite the unwillingness when he handed away the gold nugget, he actually had a whole gold bar in his pocket, the money Zheng gave him for taking on the task. The two groups finished their tasks within an hour. All the merchants showed great passion under the influence of gold and prepared everything they needed in such a short period of time. Without many more words, they took their supplies and left for a little warehouse on their horses. Ardith led them inside the warehouse, an empty warehouse. He pulled a chain on the group and opened up an entrance to a tunnel. And at the same time, two guns pointed at them from the entrance. Ardith yelled something, then two men in black climbed out. They showed him respect and Ardith nodded to them, then said to Zheng. Follow me. The weapons are below. The basement wasn't too big, but contained a large quantity of weapons. Aside from cannons, it basically had every weapon available in this era, including machine guns taken off a fighter jet. Just like how it was in the movie, Ardith picked the machine gun and some explosives. After everyone was ready, Hungla quickly said, have the two of them come with us. After we leave the marketplace, one will take part of our communication devices to the big group, the other will take the rest of the devices and head toward Hamunaptra at half our speed. As to us, we will each rotate between 3 horses and get to Hamunaptra as fast as possible. We will give them a surprise whether they arrive before us or not. Just like this, the group left the marketplace again. To avoid getting mind-controlled, everyone including Hunglu, who couldn't actually fight, headed toward Hamunaptra. It's the 3rd time we've crossed this place. I hope there won't be a 4th, Zheng said as he sat on the saddle looking over this desert. Evelyn laughed. That's not worded right. If we can't see this a 4th time, doesn't it mean that we died in Hamunaptra? It should be we must see it a 4th time. Zheng laughed at it. This was something only the players understood. They would go back to God's dimension if they finished the mission, so there's no chance of seeing the scenery again. Otherwise it would mean they failed and were chasing them or running away. Both of which could end in a wipe. I am tired of running. Might as well bet it all and settle everything in Hamunaptra. All the issues started there and will end there. Zheng looked at the NA ring. It had several grenades that weren't there before. The team decided to bury Tenji on a hill outside the marketplace and found these grenades on his body. Let everything end there. The hardships were unimaginable when traveling non-stop and rotating between 3 horses. They felt like their bodies were falling apart. Fortunately land stamina buff kept them going. They reduced the travel time from several days to just 1 day and night. It was 4 a.m., just 1 more hour before they reached Hamunaptra, right before sunrise. Then they felt the ground tremble and the intensity was gradually becoming more obvious. Everyone turned around but it was pitch black. They couldn't see anything beyond 100 meters. Zero rode to the top of a little hill and looked out. A large area of the sand is rolling toward us. Doesn't seem like a sandstorm, it's only a meter or 2 in height. It's the mummies. So many of them and they are coming so fast. These mummies had no stamina bar, nor could they feel pain or death. Several thousand mummies were running non-stop at a speed that could rival horses. Right as Zero finished his words, another wave of rolling sand came into view along with clopping sounds. 10,000 black cavalry guards were charging at the mummies. Though both parties were at quite some distance. If it wasn't for his hawk eye, he wouldn't be able to see them. Zero immediately rode back to the group. Really? Everyone pick up your speed. We will give them a surprise. Zheng yelled and led the way to Hamunaptra. The group finally reached Hamunaptra at sunrise. Hamunaptra looked magnificent under the golden sunlight, as if it had gone back through time to Egypt's prosperous era. But no one had the time to appreciate the scenery as a dozen planes flew into Hamunaptra. Everyone hid in the shadows between several stone pillars for the planes to pass. Then Zheng asked Zero, can you snipe the planes down? Zero sighed. Won't be able to get all of them. No problem if it's only a few. The Gauss rifle is powerful but it takes too long to reload. I can only shoot 3 times before the planes land. I think this is the reason they brought so many planes, to avoid getting sniped. Everyone sighed as this chance went to waste. Zheng exhaled and said, then follow our original plan. Zero is responsible for sniping that Indian woman and Hung will protect you. Remember to run after one shot whether it hits or not. Everyone else come with me into the tomb. Then we will split up to search for the statue of Ra. Whoever finds it signals with a gunshot. Zheng repeated their plan then walked to the entrance to the tomb. He turned around and looked at Zero and Hung again before entering. Zero was searching for a suitable spot whereas Hung was adjusting his bow. During this moment Zheng turned around, a hand grabbed his neck from behind and lifted him up. By the entrance to the tomb, a hand formed by sand suddenly appeared. More sand gathered around it and formed Imhotep's figure. He threw Zheng into the tomb. Zheng collided with a wall but because the wall was rather fragile, he went through it and collided with something metallic. Ardith and G were nearest to the entrance. They both opened fire at Imhotep. Yet it was shown that even magical bullets were ineffective against him in Cairo, so these normal bullets they were now using were even more so. The bullets shot through him and the hole instantly recovered. O'Connell fired with his rifle but to no avail. Imhotep stood there unharmed and transformed into a sandstorm. Yingkong reacted immediately but she only got to pull out her dagger before that sandstorm went into the tomb and disappeared from their view. At the same time, Bang. The gauze rifle made its shot at Zero's target. Then, let our plan commences. What, their team? Hunglu smiled coldly. All the others followed with a smile. Although it was unexpected that Team India arrived so early, but that did not affect their plan. This plan would push Team India into despair. Of the two Medjays that came with them, one went to the big group of cavalries and the other was following behind at half their speed. If these two were to get mind controlled, they would have to fight Team India face to face, but if they didn't, then Hunglu's plan would succeed. The Medjay that went to big group carried a secret message from Ardath to the leader of the cavalries along with the communication devices. The message requested him to send 1,000 men over to Hamunaptra, also rotating between 3 horses in order to arrive as fast as possible. And once these men heard the first gunshot, they had to charge toward Hamunaptra, killing any group that was heading there. Zero's mission was to fire at the first person from Team India he saw, didn't matter how far that person was, or if she was a Psyche Force user or not. He had to open fire even if he couldn't kill that person because the gunshot signaled the commencement of the plan. Simple logic. They will get charged by the cavalries no matter which direction they come from. After learning of our plan, their safest method of transportation was through the plain. If they don't see any cavalries around Hamunaptra, what will they do? Of course they will want to land. The only issue is if they also transported horses or camels along. But airplanes during this age don't have the capacity to do so. Then they will have to run over after they landed. But who runs faster? Horses or people? Ho ho, die in a glorious death. Ji and Lan carried Zheng out from the tomb. He looked in bad shape. A few scarabs were trying to enter his body but his muscle density prevented it. They killed the scarabs with a few shots. Zheng also recovered from the knockdown. Yingkang looked at him then at her watch. We are at positive 1 point. Zero just killed one of them. It's now up to the cavalries. Hope their attack can do something. Hunglu took a bite at an apple and said. There is no such thing as a perfect plan, not even I can make it, unless the person that made it have totally eliminated all desires and senses. Only such person can take on the perspective of a bystander. If he also has remarkable wisdom and deductive ability, then he's the perfect mastermind, the strongest mastermind. Unfortunately there is no such perfect human in this world. Perfection only leads to self-destruction. As he finished, they saw the cavalries coming from afar. Even though they knew that was only 1,000 men, but the view was spectacular. The players all came from a peaceful world and never had a chance to see something so marvelous. For a moment, everyone held their breaths and watched. The cavalries gradually came into view inside the cloud of sand and dust created by the horses running. These cavalries each carried a gun and a blade. Zheng looked at the 1,000 men and said with a cold tone. They've lost their best chance to kill us in Cairo. F***CK, we can finally take the leader. Tenji. We will avenge your death. As they were talking, everyone heard another loud bang. Zero pulled the trigger again and following the shot, the number on their watches returned to 0, signaling someone in the team died. One member died. Team China is at 0 points. Negative points at the end of the movie will be erased. 0. Zheng shouted. He immediately recalled when he first met Zero. The quiet man that always completed the tasks he gave him and saved him multiple times. He also remembered that tender smile when swam with that little girl. He was a true comrade. Zheng sprinted toward Zero's location as he shouted. Yingkang also followed along. Ji though massaged his temples as if he was had a severe headache. He crouched on the ground as sweat dripped like rain. Yet nobody noticed him because their attentions were focused on Zero and Hung. Zheng was anxious and ran at full speed. He finally reached Zero and Hung's hiding spot 10 seconds later, but the two men looked at him in confusion. Zero said calmly. The one in Indian clothes I just shot is probably Liang or Zui Yu. There are two more women in Indian clothes, both wearing veils. I don't know if I should continue or not. Zheng stared at him and slapped his shoulder. Good, you're still alive. FCK, don't effing die. I want to keep fighting alongside you, bro. Zero was surprised and took a look at Zheng then said. Until death. At the same time, Shiva was at the edge of being enraged. He shouted as he was going forward on top of a serpent's head. Beside him was Erat in werewolf form, who seemed fully healed. He was running at a comparable speed to Shiva. Shiva kept shouting. Shinea, keep attacking. You must get their location. That person is highly likely to be a guide. Guides can't attack other team members. Find his location then have Lamo kill him. Two bodies were laying on the ground behind them. One was the skinny man who used two curved blades. The other was Liang dressed in Indian women's clothes. His eyes were opened wide and his face in disbelief. There were 4 more people running on the ground, 3 women and a man. Shinea said. It's getting weaker. He's definitely a god. He's enduring God's punishment. Almost got his location, almost. Lamu. She shouted and the man beside her threw the needle on his hand. Until death. Before he finished the sentence, he took aim and pulled the trigger again. Yet at the same time blood splashed from his chest. Everyone around him watched as Zero fell to the ground with his rifle. A needle pierced into his chest. It didn't get his lungs this time but right into his heart. The blood that was gushing out indicated the hole in his heart. The needle slowly pulled itself out. The bleeding increased as the obstruction was left the heart. Zheng's face looked twisted. He immediately pressed the needle on Zero's chest, trying to prevent it from coming out. Because the moment it leaves Zero's chest was the moment he dies. Zheng didn't want to lose the comrade he acknowledged, the bro that could fight alongside him until death. Dying right in front of him, he wouldn't want it to happen. Yet the force from the needle was so strong and it emitted an electric shock when he touched it, numbing his hands. He watched as the needle pulled itself out then disappeared. Zero's blood stained his hands. Until death. I can't go along with you anymore, brother. Zero smiled and closed his eyes. The Gauss rifle slowly slid out from his arms. Zheng stared at the blood on his hands. For a while his mind went totally blank until the shouting from the cavalries afar woke him to his senses. He also began shouting with rage and the desire to kill. Team India. I want you all to die. AHH. Zheng shouted in madness. The two people beside him were also in grief. Yinkang had fought along Zero for so long. Even though the two of them never talked to each other much, but they respected each other's ability as assassins. Hung only came to this world at the beginning of this movie. He still retained the naiveness from the real world. Although Zheng's group never acknowledged him as a member of the team, but someone that just fought together with him a moment ago died. As the three of them stared at Zero's body, they suddenly heard a scream coming from the tomb's entrance. Zheng and Yinkang both cried. Imhotep. Everyone's attention was focused on Zero since he made the first shot. The incomplete Imhotep wasn't much of a threat when Zheng and Yinkang were there because both their weapons can counter him. But now that the two of them came over to Zero, the rest of the group at the entrance had no way to defend against Imhotep. Coming to this conclusion, Zheng and Yinkang immediately ran toward the entrance. Although their speed was already so fast, they were still too late. A dry corpse lay below Imhotep by the time they got there. Judging from the corpse's attire, he was the remaining American cast. Imhotep's body convulsed and the rotten parts of his body turned to normal flesh. Before long, a completely resurrected high priest stood in front of them. Imhotep smiled at them, a smile that sent shivers up their spines. He raised his hands while everyone was still shocked. The sand outside Hamunaptra formed a wave several stories tall and went at the cavalries. The cavalries were only 1,000 meters away from Team India when the sand wave buried them. At the same time, Team India ran as fast as they could. The cavalries weren't going to make it before Team India reached Hamunaptra. Zheng and Yinkang jumped at Imhotep. Zheng channeled his chi into his left fist while Yinkang took out her dagger. Both weapons had the ability to damage Imhotep, but Imhotep had learned from the past. He turned into a sandstorm and swept Evelyn and Lan before Zheng got to him, then took the two women hostage into the tomb. Zheng's face turned pale white. He picked up Jonathan and said, "What did he just say?" Ardith answered instead. He said, "Give him the Book of the Dead or else he will turn the two women into mummies." He gave us about 1 hour. Zheng's heart was beating fiercely. What was supposedly a good outlook suddenly vanished into nothingness. Zero's death, Imhotep's recovery, and now Evelyn and Lan got kidnapped. Were they destined to wipe here? O'Connell and Jonathan. You two go find the Book of Amunare. Zheng suppressed the feeling of despair and ordered them with decisiveness. Then he turned to Ardith and said, "Go with them and protect them." The curator also said, "Let me go with them also, I can read hieroglyphs." Zheng remembered Jonathan's incompetence with the language and nodded. Protect Hung and Hunglu and get into the tomb before Team India does. You won't have to worry about their ranged attacks while in the tomb. But the mind control woman is still an issue. Zheng just now noticed Ji's painful expression. What gave him an even worse feeling was a sudden flash of light in Ji's eyes. This light came and went in an instant, but Ji fell unconscious immediately. His skin began tearing apart and the blood vessels underneath bursted, covering his whole body in blood. At the same time, Team India was overjoyed. They knew that Imhotep had recovered his powers when the sandstorm hit the cavalries. That sandstorm saved their whole team, otherwise 1,000 armed cavalries were enough to wipe them. Not only this, but they also killed the sniper. They no longer had to worry about getting sniped. Lamua. Are you okay? The monk shouted without turning around. The young man's left arm had broken off and he's coughing blood. He relied on the supports of the two women beside him to keep going. My needle got him first, otherwise he would have hit my heart. What scary power. It merely scratched my arm but still took it off me. Shinea muttered. Nothing to be amazed about. We learned from their memory that this Gauss rifle can shoot through a combat vehicle with one shot. You're not. Ah. She suddenly screamed in pain and rolled on the ground with her hands on her head. Everyone else stopping moving in shock. Shiva and Erat immediately ran over to her. Although her combat ability wasn't the best, but she was the core of this team. She could be thought of as the leader without the powers given to the leader. Her voice became hoarse from the screaming. Leader. The guide attacked me. He shouldn't have been able to attack me. I was searching for their location and he suddenly invaded into my mental network, backfire. Her voice became lower and lower. By the time she said those last few words, blood was bleeding through every part of her head and her whole body was convulsing. Erat had returned to his human form when he got to her side. He held onto her head and touched her chest. Several seconds later he let go of her. Her heart is still beating but her brainwaves are abnormal. Her consciousness was forcibly erased. Her body will die out in a few minutes. Shiva took a deep breath and muttered. Any way to save her? Even if we have to give our life energy to her. Erat shook his head. Nope. The mental domain is the most mysterious field. She still has a vigorous amount of life energy. That person is a master in this field. He invaded her mental network and erased everything from her. Life energy cannot get her mind back. Shiva's face turned scary. He raised his hand and the serpent appeared. It bit at the woman and ate her under their eyes. He said with hatred. Even if she has to die, she will die in our own hands. I won't give Team China a point. They are at -1 point, right? I won't let them get another point. Team China. I want you to all die with her. As he was talking, a woman in Indian clothes who acted like a doll suddenly screamed. She looked at the people around her in confusion. This was Zuya, who had been mind-controlled the whole time. When Shinea died, she regained consciousness, but that was only a misfortune. Everyone from Team India looked at her with hatred. In contrast, Liang, who died unconsciously, was much better off than her. Team China. Ha ha ha, Team China. You will all die in misery. Ha ha ha. Zheng was confused at Ji's sudden collapse. The only ones who could still fight were him and Yinkang. Furthermore, one of Yinkang's arms wasn't in good condition. Yet if she doesn't protect Honglu now, it would be difficult to get another person with his talents. If you don't mind, Let me protect Honglu and Ji. Hung suddenly said. Zheng felt that his options were limited. He had two choices, let Hung protect Ji and Honglu, but then if Team India finds them, there is no way for them to live. The other choice was to have Yingkang protect them so that they have some means to protect themselves against Team India. However, this would only guarantee the safety of individual members and not beneficial for the team. Will he choose the individuals or the team? Hung, I'll leave them to you. Zheng clenched his teeth and turned his head away. Then he muttered. If you get killed by Team India, I will tear them apart. I will. Being in a higher up position, a lot of times his choices were forced upon him. Zheng began to understand how Xian felt. He had to place his perspective on the overall situation. He was not a god, so he could only try his best to save everyone. O'Connell's group headed into the tomb. Then Hung carried Ji on his back. Honglu carried a gun. The three of them also went into the tomb. Zheng and Yingkang were the last ones left. Zheng kept pondering over their situation. There were only 3 people who could fight and Ji suddenly collapsed. The only chance they had was to take away Imhotep's immortality before anything happens, then think of a way to defeat Team India. The werewolf is mine. Yingkang suddenly said. Zheng paused for a moment then looked at her. But your shoulder. Yingkang shook her head. I am an assassin, not some gangster who fights on the streets or a warrior that fights with her life. Assassins only have one attacking opportunity, and if it fails that means our death. I think he's also aware of this. So there isn't such a thing as injury for an assassin. He has diverged from being an assassin and tried to fight with brute force. Zheng looked at her determination and nodded. Okay then. We cannot back off anymore. Once we fail, we will all die. Yingkang, I don't want to lose another comrade. Team India had appeared from afar. They finally entered Hamunaptra before the cavalries could get back on foot. This ruined city was filled with broken walls and pillars that even if the cavalries got here now, they wouldn't be scared. Zheng stared at Shiva with hatred. He so wanted to tear him apart. When Yingkang entered the tomb, he picked up a rock as his eyes went out of focus. The muscles of his right arm expanded and he threw the rock at the monk. Zheng's power surpassed that of the muscular giant Minima while in the second stage of the unlock mode. The rock shot at Shiva like a cannon. Although it was powerful enough, but he was not zero after all. The rock missed Shiva by several centimeters and hit one of the pillars behind him. Shiva touched the mark caused by the air pressure from the throw and started to laugh like a madman. He floated toward the tomb even faster. 10 seconds after Zheng and Yingkang entered the tomb, that serpent of his shot a bolt of lightning from its mouth at the entrance and caused an explosion. Shiva took a deep breath and said. We will enter together, don't get separated. Erod. Keep control over yourself. If Lamu and Manavia die because of you, I will tear you apart. Don't make me do it. Follow our plan and find Imhotep first. He had recovered his power, so if we meet up with him, then the outcome will be decided. Ardo suddenly asked. What about her? He was holding onto a bag that was dripping blood. Shiva's expression turned sinister. Don't kill her now. I want to gather everyone from Team China and the movie characters together, then slice them into pieces. I want them to experience the torments of Avasai. I want them to live in eternal hell. Erod licked the scalpel on his hand, letting that blade slice his tongue. Then he began to enjoy sucking the blood coming out from his tongue. Team India only had 4 people there. The 3 newbies in their team were left in Cairo. Though now that Chinea died, the newbies had regained control of themselves. Shiva said as he entered the tomb. We have killed the sniper. The guide probably get punished by God, he's either dead or unable to fight anymore. They still have a support user, a female assassin, and their leader. Their leader had reached stage 2 of the unlock mode. If we get Imhotep's power, we will win. Lamua, can you still use your needle? The young man smiled bitterly and said. It's too painful. I can't concentrate. Even if I can throw it, I can only aim within 50 meters. Shiva cursed. We won't make up for the loss of Chinea even if we are to kill Team China 10 times. A talent who can enhance her mental capacity is such a rarity. I will definitely kill them all. Then he turned to the other woman. Manavia, how about you? Can you use your defensive force field? She nodded immediately. Yes, I haven't used it much during this movie. If I have to keep it up, I can keep it for 10 minutes. Good, I will leave Lamu to you. Make sure he doesn't die. After Zheng and Yingkang entered the tomb, they heard an explosion coming from behind. Zheng ran for a few more steps before he asked. Yingkang, how come I can't sense your existence? It's like you suddenly disappeared whenever you stepped into the shadows. Is that one of your assassin's techniques? Yingkang replied calmly. It's simple. Just hypnotize yourself and think of yourself as part of the darkness. Get rid of all your emotions. This is the basics for an assassin. If you can't do this, people with strong sixth senses will know you're there. Zheng paused for a moment then said. I don't think Team India will come chase us. They are probably going deeper into the tomb as a whole team. If it's me, I will first find Imhotep and stay with him. We will lose if that happens. Want to take a risk? Yingkang was surprised. What risk? Bet that their team isn't united. Zheng said with certainty. Even though this is only a feeling, but I feel that Erot doesn't follow Shiva's orders and the rest of the team is only following his orders because they are afraid of him. We will hide in the shadows and ambush them when they come. I will drag Shiva into the room that Imhotep threw me into a while ago. You go take care of Erot. I bet that the other team members will abandon him to look for Imhotep. I can only take him one-on-one, so if they decide to help, I am done for. But if they don't, then I have a chance of killing him. Want to take this risk? Zheng entered the second stage of the unlock mode and kept his mind blank, refraining from thinking of anything. He hid in the shadows. Yingkang was surprised that Zheng learned the technique in under a minute. One of the most important technique an assassin needed to learn. The two of them watched as Team India entered the tomb. Listened to their conversation as they moved closer step by step. Shiva nodded. Good, I will leave Lamu to you. Make sure he doesn't die. Zheng suddenly jumped out. He had reached within 1 meter of Shiva before anyone from Team India could react. This ambush was too fast and sudden that no one could make out his figure. Unfortunately he had to give up his knife for speed. He punched Shiva's shocked face and knocked him into the wall behind.